The great chamber of Loomis Prime Station floated in the void between stars, a monument to galactic civilization. Inside, representatives from 1,000 worlds gathered in their designated sections. The air hummed with translation devices working overtime, converting countless languages into something everyone could understand. At the center of it all stood the human delegation. 5 people who represented their entire species. Captain Hyenwu stood at the podium, his uniform crisp and his expression calm, despite the hostility radiating from every direction. Behind him, Dr. Ji-Wan reviewed her notes one last time. She had spent weeks preparing her defense, gathering evidence, building arguments. None of it would matter. She could see it in the eyes of the council members. The decision had already been made. The Vrelix ambassador rose first, his insectoid body clicking and chittering. Through the translator, his voice came out smooth and accusatory. Humanity has violated 17 protocols in the last decade alone. They expand into territories marked for preservation. They refuse to limit their military capabilities. They question our authority at every turn. We cannot allow this chaos to continue. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the chamber. The crystalline Solheim representative chimed in next, their body refracting light in sharp patterns. We opened our arms to humanity 2 centuries ago. We shared our knowledge, our technology, our culture. In return, they have shown nothing but disrespect for the order that has maintained peace for 10,000 years. Dr. Ji-Wan stepped forward when given permission to speak. Her voice was steady but passionate. We have violated protocols because some of those protocols are outdated and unjust. We expand because our people need room to grow. We maintain our military because we have seen threats in the outer regions that you refuse to acknowledge. We don't question your authority out of disrespect. We question it because that's what intelligent beings should do. Progress requires questioning. Progress. The Vrelix ambassador's laughter was a harsh, chittering sound. You call your behavior progress? You're children playing with weapons you don't understand. You're a danger to yourselves and to every civilized species in this galaxy. The debate continued for hours, but it was theater. Everyone knew the outcome. When the vote finally came, only 3 species voted against exile. The rest, over 40 civilizations, voted to remove humanity from galactic space. The sentence was clear: 6 months to evacuate all colonies within council borders. After that, any human vessel found in civilized space would be destroyed without warning. Commander Taeyang watched from the observation deck as the vote tallied, his hands clenched into fists. Beside him, Engineer Dae-Yoon placed a hand on his shoulder. "We knew this was coming," she said quietly. "We've been preparing for it." "That doesn't make it right," Taeyang replied. "We helped them. When the Korthon raiders attacked the mining colonies in the Helios sector, who stopped them? We did. When that plague broke out on Venris 3, who sent medical teams? We did, and this is how they repay us." Dae-Yoon had no answer for that. The human delegation returned to their ships in silence. The Perseverance and its sister ships began preparations for departure. Around them, other vessels kept their distance, as if being human was contagious. In the ship's conference room, the leadership gathered to discuss what came next. "The Outer Veil," Hyenwu said, pulling up a star map. The region glowed red on the display, marked as hazardous and uninhabitable. "That's where they're sending us. Everything beyond this line is ours to do with as we please, according to the council. They think it's a death sentence." "Maybe it is," someone said. "The Veil is uncharted. No one who's gone there has come back with good news. High radiation, spatial anomalies, and rumors of hostile species that make the Korthon look friendly." Hyenwu smiled grimly. "Then we'll be the first to make it work. We've survived worse. Earth was dying when we left it. We turned Mars into a garden. We've built colonies on worlds that would kill most council species in minutes. If they think the Outer Veil will break us, they're wrong." Dr. Ji-Wan spoke up. "We need to think long-term. This isn't just about survival. This is about what we become out there. We can't let bitterness consume us. If we turn into the monsters they think we are, then they win." "They've already won," Taeyang said bitterly. They've exiled us like criminals. Ah, no, Hyan Wu said firmly. They've freed us from their rules. Think about it. No more protocols limiting our technology. No more restrictions on where we can go or what we can build. No more answering to a council that sees us as inferior. Yes, we're being exiled, but maybe that's exactly what we needed. The evacuation began immediately. Millions of humans packed their lives into cargo ships and passenger vessels. Colonies that had stood for generations were abandoned. The council watched, satisfied. As humanity retreated toward the darkness of the outer veil, some felt guilt, but most felt relief. The troublesome species was finally gone. On the last day before the deadline, Captain Hyan Wu requested one final appearance before the council. They granted it, curious what humanity's last words would be. Perhaps an apology? A plea for mercy? Hyan Wu stood alone at the podium this time. His delegation had already departed. He looked out at the assembled representatives at the species who had judged his people and found them wanting. When he spoke, his voice was calm, but carried a weight that made even the most arrogant council members pay attention. You believe you're solving a problem today? You're wrong. You're creating one. We came to you in peace 200 years ago. We offered friendship, cooperation, and our unique perspective. You accepted it first, but the moment we didn't bow low enough, didn't follow your ancient rules blindly, you decided we were dangerous. So you're throwing us away, sending us to a region of space you consider worthless. He paused, letting his words sink in. Here's what you don't understand about humanity. We don't break when things get hard. We adapt. We overcome. We thrive in places that would kill others. You're sending us to the outer veil thinking it will humble us or destroy us. It will do neither. It will forge us into something stronger. Is that a threat? The Relic's ambassador demanded. No, Hyan Wu said. It's a warning. Not against us. Against what's out there. We've detected things in the deep dark, threats that your sensors don't seem to pick up. We've tried to warn you, but you don't listen. So here's my final warning. When the darkness comes, and it will come, don't expect us to save you. You exiled the one species willing to stand guard at the edge of the abyss. When you're looking into that abyss, when it's looking back at you with hungry eyes, remember this moment. Remember that you sent away your best defenders. The chamber erupted in angry chatter, but Hyan Wu simply turned and walked away. He boarded the last shuttle and left Loomis Prime behind. As his ship accelerated toward the outer veil, toward exile and uncertainty, he felt no fear. Only determination behind them. The galaxy celebrated its victory over the upstart humans. They threw festivals on a dozen worlds, toasting their newfound peace and security. They had no idea what they had just done. They had no idea what was coming. And they had no idea what humanity would become in the long silence that followed. The warnings had been given. They had been ignored. In time, the galaxy would learn the cost of that mistake. 50 years had passed since humanity vanished beyond the outer veil. For most species in the galaxy, humans had become nothing more than stories told to young ones. Be good, or the aggressive humans might return. Study hard, or you'll end up like those primitive humans who couldn't follow simple rules. The warnings Captain Hyan Wu had given were forgotten, dismissed as the desperate threats of a beaten species. Ambassador. Yol climbed the ranks of the Galactic Council during those 50 years. He had been young when humanity was exiled, barely more than a junior representative. Now he stood as one of the most influential voices in galactic politics. His homeworld of Relics Prime prospered under his guidance. Trade routes expanded. New species joined the council. Everything seemed perfect. In his private chambers, Yol sometimes thought about the humans. Not with guilt exactly, but with curiosity. What had happened to them? Had they survived? The few probe ships sent to the outer veil in the early years had returned with strange readings, but nothing conclusive. Eventually, the council stopped sending probes. Why waste resources on a dead species? Scholar Kale 5 thought differently. As a Solheim researcher, his crystalline body housed one of the most advanced scientific minds in the galaxy. He specialized in deep space analysis, and for the past decade, He had been documenting anomalies near the outer veil border. Energy signatures that didn't match any known technology. Structures appearing in scans that shouldn't exist in that region of space. Heat blooms that suggested massive industrial operations. He brought his findings to the Council's Scientific Committee 3 times. 3 times they dismissed him. The instruments are malfunctioning, they said. You're seeing echoes and ghosts in dead space, they insisted. Focus on real research instead of chasing shadows, they commanded. Kale 5 stopped bringing his findings to committees. Instead, he compiled them in private files, watching as the anomalies grew stronger and more frequent. Something was happening beyond the veil. Something big. Duhayan knew about the anomalies too. As one of the few humans who had stayed behind, hiding his identity and operating as a smuggler on the border worlds, he had access to information others didn't, Ismail shipped the whisper. Made regular runs to black market stations that existed in the gray zones between Council space and the Veil, the other smugglers. Aliens of various species treated him with suspicion and distaste when they discovered what he was. A human. One of the exiled ones. But they tolerated him because he brought valuable goods and asked no questions about their business. In return, they shared rumors and gossip from the edge of civilized space. The rumors were getting darker. Ships disappearing without distress signals. Colonies on fringe worlds going silent. Mining stations that simply vanished, leaving behind nothing but empty space. At first, these incidents were rare enough to ignore. Pirates, people said. Equipment failures. Natural disasters. But as the years passed, the disappearances increased. Duhayan tried to warn people. He sent anonymous messages to Council security forces describing the pattern he saw. They ignored him. He contacted news networks. They refused to run the stories. After all, who would believe a human smuggler over the official Council position that everything was fine? Then Duhayan saw them with his own eyes. He had been making a routine supply run to a mining outpost called Far Harbor when his sensors picked up something massive approaching. His first instinct was to run, but curiosity made him stay. He powered down all systems, letting his ship drift like debris, and watched. The vessel that emerged from the dark was like nothing in any database. It was enormous, easily 3 kilometers long, and its hull seemed to be both organic and mechanical at once. Flesh and metal merged in patterns that hurt to look at. It moved with purpose, gliding toward Far Harbor with terrible grace. Duhayan watched in horror. As the vessel extended tendrils toward the mining station, the station's defenses activated, firing lasers and kinetic weapons. The attacks simply vanished into the hull, absorbed as if they were nothing. The tendrils connected to the station and began pulling. Not destroying, pulling, harvesting. Within 20 minutes, the entire station was gone. Consumed. The massive vessel continued on its path. Deeper into Council space, leaving nothing behind. Duhayan waited another hour before powering up his ship and running. He went straight to the nearest Council outpost and demanded to speak with someone in authority. The station commander, a bored Relics official, barely listened to his story. When Duhayan finished, the commander waved a claw dismissively. A human smuggler reports seeing monsters in the dark. How original. If you're trying to scare us into giving you some kind of reward or protection, it won't work. I have sensor logs, Duhayan insisted, pulling up his ship's recordings. Look at this. Tell me what that is. The commander glanced at the data and frowned. Your sensors are clearly damaged. This shows nothing but static and impossible readings. Get your equipment fixed before you waste any more of my time. Duhayan left the outpost in frustration. His sensors weren't damaged. He knew what he had seen. But no one would listen to him. He was human, and in the eyes of the galaxy, humans were liars and troublemakers. Months passed. The disappearances continued. Entire colonies now, not just stations. Worlds that housed millions went dark overnight. The Council finally acknowledged something was happening, but they blamed it on pirates or equipment failures. They sent investigation teams that never returned. They dispatched military patrols that disappeared without trace, Scholar. Kale 5 noticed the pattern in the disappearances. They followed a path, moving steadily from the outer veil toward the core worlds. Whatever was taking ships and colonies was methodically working its way through council space. He tried once more to bring this to official attention, but his warnings fell on deaf ears. Ambassador Yule received reports from his homeworld. Ships were disappearing near Vrelic's territory. The military was concerned, but unsure what they were facing. Yule authorized increased patrols and better defenses. It wouldn't be enough. He didn't know that yet. In a dark cantina on the border world of Kara's station, Duhayan sat with a group of smugglers and information brokers. They spoke quietly, nervously, about the attacks. Everyone had lost someone now. Everyone had heard the stories. "It's spreading," Athelian merchant said, her voice trembling. "My cousin's colony, gone. Just gone. No bodies, no wreckage, like they were never there." "The council isn't doing anything," another added. "They're too proud to admit they can't handle this." Duhayan took a drink and set his glass down carefully. "They need to swallow their pride and look beyond the veil." The others stared at him. "The humans." Someone asked, "You think the humans could help? Even if they're still alive out there, why would they?" "We exiled them." "Exactly," Duhayan said. "We exiled them. But we also made them desperate. Desperate people get creative. They adapt. If anyone figured out how to survive in that hell, it's humans." "You're one of them," the Thelian said. "Do you know something? Do you have contact with your people?" Duhayan shook his head sadly. "No, I stayed behind 50 years ago. I haven't heard from any humans since. But I know my people. If they survived, they're not the same species that left. There's something more now. They have to be." The conversation moved on to other topics, but Duhayan couldn't shake his thoughts. Somewhere beyond the veil, humanity was either dead or changed. If they were alive, would they help? Could they help? And more importantly, would they want to? The galaxy had thrown them away like trash. Why would humanity risk anything to save their oppressors? These questions haunted Duhayan as he returned to his ship. As he plotted his next run, he made a decision. He would try to reach the veil himself. He would try to find his people. It was probably suicide, but doing nothing was worse. Behind him, the galaxy continued its slow slide toward catastrophe. The disappearances increased. Fear spread, and still, no one admitted the truth that was becoming clearer every day. Something ancient and hungry had awakened in the dark, and the galaxy had no idea how to fight it. The council held emergency sessions, debating responses and strategies. They never once mentioned seeking help from humanity. Pride wouldn't allow it. They had made their choice 50 years ago. Now, they would live with the consequences, even if those consequences meant extinction. The long silence was ending. What came next would shake the galaxy to its foundation. The attack on Vrelic's Prime came without warning. One moment the planet orbited peacefully, its cities glowing with light and life. The next moment, the sky filled with horrors from nightmare. They called themselves nothing. They had no name that any translator could recognize. But the species who survived their attacks gave them one, the Devourers. The name fit. They consumed everything. Metal, organic matter, energy. All of it absorbed into their biomechanical ships and used to create more of themselves. Ambassador. Yol was in a shuttle returning to the surface when the attack began. He watched through the viewport as massive vessels emerged from nowhere, their hulls twisting and pulsing with unnatural life. The planetary defense grid activated immediately, thousands of weapons firing at once. The lasers and missiles struck the Devourer's ships and simply vanished. Absorbed into their hulls like water into sand, the Devourers didn't fire back at first. They didn't need to. Their ships extended tendrils, thousands of them, reaching down to the planet's surface. Where the tendrils touched, cities disappeared, not destroyed, consumed. Buildings, vehicles, people, all pulled upward into the waiting ships. Yol's communicator exploded with panicked voices. Millions were dying every minute. His shuttle pilot tried to flee, but 3 other ships filled with evacuees were ahead of them. A tendril caught the lead ship and began pulling it toward a devourer vessel. The people inside screamed over the open channel. Then the screaming stopped. The ship was gone. Yule's shuttle managed to escape, jumping to hyperspace in a desperate random direction. Behind them, Vrelix Prime continued to die. By the time help arrived 6 hours later, the planet was a lifeless rock. Every city, every living thing, all of it consumed. 4 billion souls gone? The news reached the Galactic Council within hours. Panic spread faster than light. This wasn't pirates or equipment failure. This was war. War against an enemy they didn't understand and couldn't fight. Commander? Heian stood on the bridge of the Council flagship Unity's Pride, staring at the tactical display. She commanded the largest military force in galactic history, ships from 24 species all working together. They had gathered at the Kaldan Expanse, ready to stop the Devourers from advancing further into Council space. "We have numbers on our side," her second officer said, trying to sound confident. 10,000 ships. Surely that's enough. Heian wanted to believe that. She had trained her entire life for command, studied every major battle in galactic history. Nothing prepared her for this. The Devourers didn't follow conventional tactics. They didn't negotiate. They just consumed. The enemy fleet appeared on sensors. Only 100 ships, vastly outnumbered. Heian felt a moment of hope. Then she saw how big those ships were. Each Devourer vessel was massive, dwarfing even the largest Council dreadnoughts. And they were moving fast, incredibly fast for their size. "All ships, open fire," Heian commanded. 10,000 ships fired at once. Space lit up with weapon discharge. Energy beams, kinetic projectiles, plasma charges. Everything the galaxy had invented for warfare. The barrage struck the Devourer fleet and accomplished nothing. Every shot was absorbed. The enemy didn't even slow down. Then the Devourers returned fire. Their weapons were like nothing in any database. Beams of distorted reality that made space itself scream. Where the beams struck, Council ships simply ceased to exist. Not destroyed, not vaporized. They just stopped being. Hundreds of vessels vanished in the first volley. The battle became a massacre. The Council fleet tried every tactic, every strategy. Nothing worked. The Devourers moved through them like a blade through paper. Commander Heian watched her forces die, helpless to stop it. When the Unity's Pride took a direct hit, she barely had time to evacuate before the ship was consumed. She and a handful of survivors escaped in a small transport. Behind them, the remains of the Council fleet scattered in terror. Of 10,000 ships, fewer than 1,000 survived to retreat. The Devourers continued their advance. It's unstoppable. In a research facility on Axios Prime, scientist June studied what little data remained from the battle. As a Solheim, he could process information faster than most species, but even he struggled to understand what he was seeing. The Devourer technology made no sense. It violated basic physics. Matter and energy behaved differently around their ships, as if reality itself bent to their will. "We need to understand them," he told his team. "Find a weakness. There has to be something." Days of analysis revealed nothing useful. The Devourers were too advanced, too different. They had been refining their technology for millions of years, while the Council species were still crawling out of their oceans. How do you fight something that evolved to be the perfect predator? Scholar Kel 5 had an idea. He brought his decades of research to June's facility, spreading out his carefully compiled data. "Look at this. The anomalies beyond the outer veil, the strange readings, the energy signatures. They increased as the Devourers grew more active. What if there's a connection?" June examined the data with his crystalline mind, processing at full speed. "You think something was keeping them dormant? Something in the outer veil?" "Not something," Kale Fave said quietly. "Someone. The humans. They were out there for 50 years. What if their presence, their activity, was keeping the Devourers asleep? When we exiled humanity, We removed the one thing holding these monsters back. The implications were staggering. The galaxy had exiled its guardians without knowing it. But that raised another question. If humans could keep the Devourers at bay, where were they now? Why weren't they helping? Ambassador Yule thought he knew the answer. He had survived the destruction of his homeworld and now sat in the emergency council chambers on Axios Prime. Around him, representatives from dozens of species argued and blamed each other. Their civilization was crumbling, and they were still playing political games. "We need to admit the truth," Yule said, standing up. The chamber fell silent. "We need humanity." The reaction was immediate and angry. Voices rose in protest. The humans were gone. The humans were probably dead. The humans wouldn't help even if they could. The humans were the reason this started. Every excuse except the truth. We exiled them. Yule shouted over the noise. We threw them away because they wouldn't bow to us. And now we're dying because we were too proud to listen to their warnings. Captain Hyanwu told us something was coming. We ignored him. Now his words are coming true. Even if we wanted to contact them, we don't know how, someone argued. No one knows where in the outer veil they went. Then we search, Yule insisted. We send ships to find them. We beg for their help. We do whatever it takes, Council reluctantly agreed. They had no other choice. Search parties were dispatched into the outer veil, ships volunteering for what everyone knew was likely a suicide mission. Most never reported back. The few that did brought back impossible tales. One captain reported finding a station the size of a moon, built in a style that was clearly human, but far beyond anything humanity had possessed 50 years ago. Another found an entire star system transformed. Planets moved from their natural orbits into perfect geometric patterns. A third discovered a fleet of vessels unlike any in recorded history. Ships that could bend space itself and move faster than physics should allow, but no one found humans. No one received answers to their distress calls. It was as if humanity had ascended to something beyond communication with their former oppressors. Then, 3 months after the search began, a message reached the Council. It played on every screen, every monitor, every display throughout their territory. The face on the screen was human, aged and hard, but unmistakable. Admiral Hoyan Wu, the man who had warned them 50 years ago. "I see you're finally ready to listen," he said, his voice devoid of warmth. "You exiled us. You called us dangerous and aggressive. You sent us to die in the outer veil, but we didn't die. We thrived. We became what we needed to be to survive in the darkness you sent us to." He paused, letting his words sink in. "You're facing the Devourers now. Ancient predators that have consumed 1,000 civilizations before yours. They were dormant in the deep dark, sleeping until something disturbed them. When we lived in the outer veil, we kept them that way. We fought off their scouts. We maintained a barrier they couldn't cross. We were your guards, and you never knew it. Now you want our help. You want the species you exiled to save you from your own ignorance. I should refuse. By your own laws, we owe you nothing." You made that clear. Council representatives watching the message held their breath. This was it. Humanity's answer. Rejection felt inevitable. Deserved, even Hyanwa's expression softened slightly. "But we're not like you. We don't abandon people who need us, even people who abandoned us first. We've been watching your struggle. We know what the Devourers are and how to fight them. We'll help you. Not because you deserve it, but because it's the right thing to do. Know this, though. When this is over, things change. Humanity will never again bow to your council. We'll work with you as equals or not at all. Consider that your price for salvation." The message ended. Throughout council space, reactions varied. Relief, anger, gratitude, resentment. But underneath it all, a single question echoed. What had humanity become in those 50 years beyond the veil? And would the galaxy survive meeting this new version of its exiled children? The sky above Axios Prime burned with the light of 100 Devourer ships. The planet housed the Galactic Council headquarters, the symbolic heart of civilization. If it fell, hope would die with it. Every remaining council fleet had gathered for this desperate last stand. They knew they couldn't win. They were buying time for civilians to evacuate, nothing more. Admiral Hayen stood in the command center deep beneath the surface, coordinating the defense. Her face was haggard from weeks of running battles, her uniform stained and torn. Around her, officers worked frantically at their stations, tracking the enemy's approach. The Devourers would arrive in 20 minutes. The evacuation ships needed 30. Can't hold them that long, her tactical officer said quietly. We don't have enough ships left. Hayen knew he was right. But what choice did they have? They would fight until they couldn't anymore. She opened the fleet-wide channel to give what might be her final order. Before she could speak, alarms blared across every station. Do contacts. Someone shouted, massive number of ships emerging from slip space. On the tactical display, dozens of new signatures appeared, then hundreds. Ships materialized between Axios Prime and the approaching Devourers, forming a defensive wall. The vessels were enormous, their designs clearly human in origin, but transformed. Where human ships 50 years ago had been functional and simple, these were works of art and terror combined. Sleek hulls lined with weapons that glowed with barely contained energy. Armor that seemed to shift and flow like living metal. At the center of the formation, one ship dwarfed all others. The Reckoning, a dreadnought 5 kilometers long, bristling with more firepower than some entire fleets. On its bridge stood Admiral Hyanwu, older now, but still sharp-eyed and commanding. This is Admiral Hyanwu of the Human Defense Fleet to all Council forces. Stand down and let us handle this. You've done enough. The words stung, but no one argued. The Council ships pulled back, grateful and ashamed in equal measure. They watched as the human fleet adjusted formation, moving with precision that spoke of years of combat experience. These weren't the same humans who had been exiled. These were warriors forged in the darkness. Tested against horrors the Council couldn't imagine, the Devourers reached weapons range and fired their reality-warping beams. The weapons that had annihilated Council fleets struck the human shields and stopped. The humans had somehow found a way to block them. Energy barriers rippled with absorbed power, holding firm against the impossible attacks. Then humanity fired back. The weapons were different from anything that Galaxy had seen. Beams that seemed to cut through space itself. Missiles that phased through shields before exploding. Kinetic rounds that accelerated to near-light speed. The barrage struck the Devourer fleet and actually damaged them. Hull plating cracked. Ships reeled from the impacts. For the first time since the war began, the Devourers faced an enemy that could hurt them. The battle raged for 3 hours. It was brutal and chaotic, but the tide had shifted. Human ships moved with impossible grace, their pilots anticipating Devourer tactics before they happened. Human weapons targeted weak points that Council scientists hadn't even known existed. And when Devourer ships tried to extend their consuming tendrils, human forces were already there to intercept them. By the end, 30 Devourer vessels lay dead in space, their hulls torn apart and leaking whatever passed for their blood. The rest retreated, something they had never done before in this war. The human fleet didn't pursue. They held position, protecting Axios Prime. In the command center, Hayen and her staff stood in stunned silence. They had just witnessed the impossible, a human victory against an enemy that had seemed unstoppable. Someone started clapping, then another. Soon, the entire room erupted in applause and cheers. They were alive. The planet was saved, and humanity, the exiled species, had made it happen. Ambassador Yule requested a meeting with Admiral Hyanwu immediately. The human agreed, but insisted it take place aboard the Reckoning. A shuttle carried Yule and a small diplomatic team to the massive dreadnought. As they approached, Yule got his first real look at what humanity had built. The ship was a fortress in space, covered in weapons arrays and armor plating that seemed to absorb light itself. But it was also beautiful in a harsh way, all clean lines and efficient design. They docked in a bay that could have held a dozen Council cruisers, and were escorted through corridors that hummed with power. They found Hyanwu on the bridge, studying tactical displays. He turned as they entered, and Y'all got his first close look at the man who had warned them so long ago. He was older, his hair gray and face-lined, but his eyes held a strength that was almost frightening. This wasn't a man who had merely survived the outer veil. This was a man who had conquered it, Ambassador Yulhainwu said, his tone neutral. I remember you. You voted for exile. Y'all felt shame burn through him. I did. I was wrong. Everything you warned us about came true. My homeworld is gone because we didn't listen to you. Yes, Hyenwu said simply. No forgiveness in his voice, but no cruelty either. Just statement of fact. What do you want, Ambassador? To understand, Yul replied. What happened to you out there? How did you become this? How do you fight the Devourers when we couldn't? Hyunwoo gestured to a view screen showing the outer veil. You sent us to what you thought was hell. Empty space filled with radiation and anomalies. What you didn't know was that the veil wasn't empty. It was full of life. Hostile, aggressive, dangerous life. He pulled up images of creatures and ships that made Yul's insect blood run cold. Massive void-welling organisms that fed on starships. Mechanical swarms that stripped planets bare. Dimensional predators that existed halfway between realities. And worse things that defied description. In our first year beyond the veil, we lost a third of our people, Hyenwu continued. The second year, we lost another quarter. We adapted or died. We studied every threat we encountered. We took their technology, learned from it, improved it. We became harder, stronger, smarter, and the Devourers, Y'all asked. We encountered them in year 15. A small scout force, testing the Veil's borders. We destroyed them, but not before learning they were sleeping in the deep dark, waiting for the right time to awaken. We realized if we left, if we allowed the Veil to go quiet, they would wake up and come looking for easier prey. So we stayed, fought. We kept them dormant. You were protecting us, Yell said quietly. Even after we exiled you, not protecting you, Hyenwu corrected. Protecting the innocent people in your civilizations who had no say in your political decisions, children, families, people just trying to live. They didn't deserve to die for their leader's mistakes. The shame grew worse. Yul forced himself to continue. What happens now? Now we finish what you started, Hyenwu said. We'll help you defeat the Devourers. Not because you deserve it, but because it needs doing. After that, humanity goes its own way. We'll trade with you, work with you, when our interests align, but we won't bow to your council ever again. Council will have to agree to that, Yell said. Things will have to change. They will, Hyenwu confirmed. Or we leave you to handle the next crisis alone. A young officer approached the admiral, saluting sharply. Sir General Ji Young reports the ground forces are ready for deployment. Captain Buell's fighter wing is also prepared. We're awaiting your orders. Hyenwu nodded. Tell them to stand by. We have more battles ahead. Yul looked at the officer, recognizing the efficiency and discipline. These weren't desperate refugees anymore. They were professional soldiers of a military that had been tested in ways the galaxy couldn't imagine. 50 years ago, humanity had been a young species playing at war. Now, they were masters of it. I have one more question, Yul said. The humans, who stayed behind when you left, like the smuggler Duhyan. What about them? We've been watching them, Hyenwu said. Anyone who wants to join us is welcome. Send word through your networks. Any human in council space who wants to come home can do so. We take care of our own, even those who chose to stay behind. As Yul and his team returned to their shuttle, he thought about what he had seen. Humanity had been transformed by their exile, turned from an annoying political problem into a military power that might be stronger than the entire council combined. The galaxy had tried to throw them away and had created something far more formidable than what they had feared. The question now was whether this new humanity could be trusted. They had helped today, but what about tomorrow? What would they demand in return for their assistance? And most importantly, what would they do if the council refused to give them the equality they demanded? Those questions would have to wait. First, they had to survive. The Devourers were still out there, And despite the victory at Axios Prime, everyone knew the war was far from over. It was only beginning. The war changed after Axios Prime. The Galactic Council, humbled by defeat and saved by those they had exiled, finally listened. They integrated human forces into their defensive strategies. They studied human technology. They learned human tactics. It was awkward and sometimes painful. Survival mattered more than pride. General Guiyang led the training of Council ground forces in human combat doctrine. She was a tall woman with sharp features and eyes that had seen too much death. Her powered armor, a marvel of human engineering, made her nearly unstoppable in close combat. Council soldiers who had never worked with humans watched in awe as she demonstrated techniques that seemed impossible. Speed and aggression, she told a mixed group of trainees from a dozen species. The Devourers are stronger and more durable than anything you've faced. You can't outlast them. You have to hit fast, hit hard, and keep moving. Stand still, and you die. She activated a training simulation, showing footage from battles in the Outer Veil. The trainees watched human soldiers, fighting creatures that made the Devourers look friendly. Each engagement was brutal and quick. The humans never stopped moving, using terrain and teamwork to overcome enemies that should have killed them. "This is what we learned in the darkness," Young said. "Every lesson cost lives. Learn from our losses, so you don't have to pay the same price." The training was hard, pushing Council soldiers beyond what they thought possible. But they learned. Slowly, the combined forces became more effective. Mixed human-alien units began winning engagements that would have been massacres before. Engineer Daeyoon, now in her 70s but still brilliant, worked with Council scientists to retrofit their ships with human defensive technology. The hardest part wasn't the engineering. It was overcoming the prejudice. "Your shield design is inefficient," she told a Solheim engineer during a heated debate. "You're spreading the power too thin, trying to protect everything at once. Concentrate it on key areas. Accept that some systems will be vulnerable, but ensure the vital ones survive." "Oh, that's barbaric," the engineer replied. "We value all parts of our ships equally, and that's why the Devourers tore them apart," Daeyoon said bluntly. "Pretty philosophy, doesn't matter if you're dead. You asked for our help. Take it or don't, but stop wasting my time with moral arguments about shield allocation." The engineer eventually listened. They all did. Results mattered more than wounded pride. Ships equipped with human modifications started surviving battles they would have lost. The Council fleet slowly rebuilt, stronger than before. Meanwhile, human intelligence networks had been tracking Devourer movements. They discovered something terrifying. The attack so far had been probing actions. The real Devourer fleet, millions of ships strong, was gathering at a location deep in unexplored space. They called it the Nexus, a massive structure built around a dying star. It was their home, their shipyard, and their brain. Destroying it would end the invasion, but reaching it seemed impossible. The Nexus was protected by defenses that had defeated every probe sent to investigate. Getting a fleet close enough to attack would require fighting through layers of Devourer ships. Even with human help, the losses would be catastrophic. Admiral Heian-Woo studied the problem for weeks. Consulting with his best strategists and scientists, Dr. Soman, the head of human weapons development, proposed a radical solution. She had been developing a new weapon, something so powerful it could crack a planet. Using it on the Nexus might work, but the weapon needed to be delivered by a ship that could survive getting close. Very few vessels could do that. "A reckoning can," Heian-Woo said quietly. "But it's a one-way trip." The room fell silent. Everyone knew what he was suggesting. Soman shook her head. "Sir, we can find another way. We don't need to sacrifice the flagship and everyone on it." "We've run the simulations," Heian-Woo replied. "Any other approach gives us less than 10% chance of success. This gives us 90%. I'm not asking for volunteers. I'm going alone. The reckoning can be operated by one person if needed." "No," said Captain Buell, stepping forward. She was young, barely 30, one of humanity's best fighter pilots. "You're not going alone. We all go?" This is our fight too, others echoed her sentiment. The crew of the Reckoning, over 5,000 people, volunteered to a person. Hyanwu tried to order them to stand down, but they refused. Some things mattered more than survival. Some battles required sacrifice. The council learned of the plan and called an emergency session. Ambassador Yule represented humanity in the debate, having earned the position through his honesty about past mistakes. When the council members heard what humans were proposing, reactions were mixed. You would sacrifice your flagship and everyone on it? A representative asked. That seems excessive. It seems necessary, Yule corrected. Admiral Hyanwu and his crew understand the cost of victory. They've always understood it. That's what makes them different from us. They don't just calculate the price. They pay it. The council approved the plan. They had no better options. A massive combined fleet would assault the Nexus from multiple directions, drawing away defenders while the Reckoning made its final run. Every species contributed ships. Even those who had been most vocal about human exile sent vessels to help. This wasn't about pride anymore. It was about survival. The assault began on a day that would be remembered forever in galactic history. Thousands of ships converged on the Nexus from 6 different vectors. The Devourers responded with their full might, and space became a whirling chaos of weapons, fire, and dying ships. Council vessels fought with everything they had learned from humanity. They held formation. They concentrated fire. They kept moving. General Ji Young led ground forces in boarding actions against Devourer vessels, fighting through nightmarish corridors to destroy key systems. Her powered armor was covered in the strange ichor that passed for Devourer blood. But she kept fighting, kept pushing forward. Around her, human and alien soldiers worked together, protecting each other, dying together. Captain Buyol flew her fighter through impossible tangles of enemy fire, her squadron covering larger ships as they made their attack runs. She lost friends with every minute, but kept flying, kept fighting. There was no time for grief. That would come later if there was a later, and through it all, the Reckoning pressed deeper into Devourer defenses. Admiral Hyanwu sat in the command chair, giving orders calmly, even as his ship took hit after hit. The armor held. The shields held. His crew held. They were almost there. Sir, hull breaches on decks 6 through 12, his tactical officer reported. We're venting atmosphere, sealing those sections. Keep moving, Hyanwu ordered. All power to forward shields. Nothing else matters now. The Nexus loomed before them, a structure so massive it defied comprehension. Tendrils larger than cities reached out, trying to grab the Reckoning and pull it apart. Point defense systems shot them down, but more kept coming. The ship shuddered under sustained fire from a dozen directions. Target locked, the weapons officer said. Ready to fire on your command? Hyanwu opened channels to the entire fleet, to every ship fighting in this desperate battle. This is Admiral Hyanwu. We're at the target. I want everyone to know it's been an honor serving with you. Council species, you may have exiled us, but you're still worth saving. Take care of each other after this. Build something better than what came before. He turned to his crew, these people who had chosen to die with him. I'm proud of every one of you. You've proven what humanity can be when we stand together. The galaxy will remember us. Then he gave the order. Fire. The weapon unleashed its full power, a beam of compressed energy that burned through space itself. It struck the Nexus's core, and for a moment, nothing happened. Then the entire structure began to crack. Explosions rippled across its surface. The dying star at its center went critical, consuming the Nexus from within. The Reckoning was caught in the blast radius. Hyanwu had known it would be. He sat in his chair as his ship was torn apart, feeling no fear, only satisfaction. They had done it. The war was won. Across the galaxy, Devourer forces suddenly stopped fighting. Their coordination was gone. Their purpose was gone. Without the Nexus to guide them, they were just ships drifting in the void. The Council fleet, battered and bleeding, secured victory. In the months that followed, the galaxy mourned and rebuilt. The Reckoning and its crew became legend. Monuments were raised on 100 worlds honoring their sacrifice. The greatest was built on Axios Prime, listing every name of every human who died in the war. Millions came to visit it, to remember what had been paid for their survival. The Galactic Council disbanded. In its place, a new government formed, the Galactic Union. Every species had equal representation. Humanity was a founding member, not as servants but as partners. The prejudices of the past slowly faded, replaced by hard-earned respect. Dr. G1, who had survived the entire ordeal, spoke at the Union's opening session. She was ancient now, kept alive by technology, but her mind remained sharp. We were exiled because we were different, because we questioned, because we refused to bow. That exile could have destroyed us. Instead, it forged us into what we needed to be to save you all. She paused, letting her words sink in. Remember this lesson? Diversity is not weakness. Different perspectives, different approaches, these are strengths. If you exile those who don't fit your comfortable mold, you might be throwing away your only chance at survival. The strong should lift up the weak, not cast them out. That's what humanity learned in the darkness. Now it's your turn to learn it in the light. On a distant world near what used to be the Outer Veil, a monument stood on barren ground. It listed the names of every human who had died during the 50 years of exile. Those who fell to hostile aliens, to spatial anomalies, to simple accidents in an unforgiving environment. Captain Bajel brought her training class there, a mixed group of human and alien cadets learning to fly together. They forced humanity to leave, she told them, gesturing at the monument. They ignored our warnings. The galaxy faced the consequences. My people paid a terrible price, but we never broke. We never stopped caring about those who wronged us. We saved them anyway. She looked at her students, seeing the future in their young faces. You are that future. Human and alien, working together, protecting each other. Make sure the mistakes of the past stay in the past. Make sure no one else has to pay the price my people paid. The students stood silent, taking in the weight of history. Then they saluted the monument, honoring the dead who had made their present possible. As they returned to their ships, the sun set over the memorial, casting long shadows that reached toward the stars. The galaxy had learned its lesson. It had been written in fire and sacrifice, in exile and redemption. The cost was terrible, but the lesson was clear. Strength without compassion creates tyrants. But compassion without strength saves no one. Humanity had learned to balance both. Now it was the galaxy's turn to do the same, and in the darkness between stars, where new threats would inevitably emerge, guardians watched. Some were human. Some were alien. All were united in purpose. Never again would the strong exile the different. Never again would warnings go unheeded. The galaxy had faced the consequences of its mistakes and survived. That survival came with a responsibility. To be better, to do better. To build a future worthy of those who died to make it possible. The story of humanity's exile and return became legend, told on 1,000 worlds to 1,000 generations. And always the lesson remained the same. Listen to those who warn you of danger, even when you don't want to hear it. Especially when you don't want to hear it. Because sometimes, the ones you cast out are the only ones who can save you when the darkness comes.